Hello everyone. I am going to make some settings to start the live stream on YouTube, so please give me 1 second. Live stream on YouTube. Okay. Some technical issues. Hold on, bear with me. Okay. I'm having some issues with YouTube, so I'm gonna go ahead. So good morning and afternoon and evening, depending on where you are joining us from today. Welcome to today's Invasivesnet webinar, titled Leading the Global Response to Biological Invasions, a dialogue between GuardIAS and OneSTOP. My name is Sebastian Gomez Maldonado, and I'm very pleased to be hosting today's discussion. Before we begin, I want to briefly acknowledge Invasivesnet, the international network hosting today's webinar. Invasivesnet works to fortify global communication, collaboration, and knowledge exchange around biological invasions by connecting researchers, practitioners, managers, educators, and policymakers across regions and disciplines. One of the goals of initiatives like this webinar is to help create conversations across projects, sectors, and geographic boundaries, because invasive species management is ultimately a shared global challenge. As you're well aware, biological invasions are increasingly becoming one of the defining environmental challenges of our time. They affect biodiversity, ecosystem functioning, economies, and human health, and they're also deeply connected to globalization and trade, climate change, and human movement across landscapes and borders. At the same time, the way we respond to invasive species is evolving very rapidly. We are moving beyond isolated monitoring efforts and reactive management approaches towards something much more broader, which is coordinated systems that integrate technology, data sharing, early detection, policy, stakeholder engagement, and international collaboration. And that is is really what today's conversation is about. Today, we'll hear from two major Horizon Europe initiatives that are helping shape the future of invasion science from different but highly complementary perspectives. On the first hand, we have GuardIAS, which is advancing coordinated aquatic biosecurity systems across Europe. And on the other hand, we have OneSTOP, which is developing integrated approaches for terrestrial invasive species. But rather than thinking about these as simply two separated projects, I think what makes today's especially exciting is that they reflect a broader transition happening in innovation science, and that is towards a more integrated, proactive, and collaborative biosecurity frameworks. We're extremely fortunate to be joined by two outstanding scientists leading important components of these initiatives. First, we'll hear from Professor Stelios Katsanevakis, coordinator of the GuardIAS project from the University of Aegean. Following that, we'll hear from Dr. Lawson Handley from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, who leads the air DNA component within OneSTOP. After both presentations, we'll move into a moderated discussion, followed by an audience Q&A session. So without further ado, thank you all for joining us today. Let me first introduce our first speaker, Professor Stelios is a marine ecologist and internationally recognized expert in biological invasions, marine conservation, and invasion policy. He is the coordinator of the Horizon Europe GuardIAS project. His work bridges science, policy, and applied management, particularly through collaborations with European initiatives such as Aegean and broader EU biodiversity frameworks. Professor, thank you very much for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, and thank you to Invasivesnet for organizing this webinar. I'm very happy to be here together with Laurie to present GuardIAS and OneSTOP and have fruitful discussions. I think you can see my screen now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so GuardIAS. This is the structure of GuardIAS, and I'm starting with that to indicate that the project has as objectives to span all the different stages, all the different phases of invasion, starting from transport to introduction, establishment, and spread. So we have 5 main work packages. The first one is about prevention, the second one about detection, early detection and monitoring. Then we deal with prioritization of the threats of invasive species, to sites, with a focus on threatened species of the red list. We deal about control, aiming to build capacity in support of management actions, and also we try to engage stakeholders and the public and assess socio-ecological interactions in invasive species management. Of course, we also have a work package for ensuring the impact of the project, all dissemination exploitation is there, and the management of the project. So I will provide some highlights. I will not discuss every single task and every activity of the project, but just some highlights from all the different thematics of the project. In terms of prevention, the development of the GuardIAS intelligence analyst system is one important product of the project. And here we have developed this system which aggregates knowledge from multiple databases like WORMS, GBIF, CABI, Aegean, IUCN, Aquanis, and others. And also uses AI to extract information from the literature and combine all this information into a report that the user can use. I have here the link. This is open currently and everyone can use it. And if you use it, we would be very happy to receive any feedback. Then we work on assessing biosecurity risks and we put a focus on shipping. We assess the biosecurity risks from the movement of vessels, both vessels for transferring products, but also recreational vessels. So for example, in these figures, you can see the international vessel arrivals into the Mediterranean Sea. And we are talking about recreational movement. And we conduct network analysis to identify the connections, areas and sub-networks within the Mediterranean that are more connected than others, and in this way assess how easy secondary spread of invasive species is within a basin. We are also working, this is a more applied effort. We are in order to use nanotechnology for developing better anti-fouling products. I will not enter into the technical details, but the idea here is to prepare the proper materials that through embedded membranes or by spray coating on ship hulls will act as anti-fouling agents, and we are testing that both in vitro and in situ, and the aim is to make it also operational, test it in the proper environment on vessels, and if these products are promising, then to also proceed with the first steps for marketing these products in the shipping industry. In terms of detection, we are developing novel technologies for improving the detection capacity. For example, our partners, Lobster Robotics, have developed this robot. In the framework of the project, we developing a multi-robot governance system, so many robots operating together and cooperating in scanning large surface of the sea bottom and producing very high quality georeferenced optical images where we can detect invasive species, non-native species in general, and assess their distribution and compare these in time, and then assessing also trends. We are also developing real-time artificial intelligence-driven EAS detection with these robots. Then we're using a lot passive acoustic monitoring, and the idea here is that many species produce sounds, and when we have a permanent station, an hydrophone like the one you see in the image, we can collect footage every day for weeks, for months, and then we can analyze this footage and assess the presence and activity of non-native species. But to do that, we need to be able to link specific sound that is produced to the species that produce it. And to do that, we use existing sound libraries and try actually to enrich these libraries by controlled recordings in public aquariums or in laboratory tanks. So we know which species is in the tank. We can directly link the sound the species is producing. And also we are deploying underwater video acoustic baited stations. And in these stations, as you see in the photo in the right, we have cameras. We will put hydrophones, a bait, and then several organisms will be attracted, and by having both optical and acoustic footage, we can link the sound each species produces to the actual species. We are using a lot environmental DNA, and actually we are trying in the project to move beyond simple detection. So having just the occurrence of a species in a specific location, and to also estimate abundance. And experiments that have been conducted by our colleagues in IMBO in freshwater systems are very promising. As you can see, these graphs, in one axis we have the abundance of a specific species. In the vertical axis we have the eDNA concentration, and there is a very good correlation. And also a very good correlation between eDNA concentration and the catch per unit effort, which is actually an index of abundance. So these results are very promising for expanding these approaches for other species and also maybe to the marine environment. And we are also utilizing citizen science. We have developed a project through iNaturalist. More than 100 people participate in this project, and we have collected more than 300,000 observations of our target species, which are 288 species, both freshwater and marine. And the idea here is that we have a sufficient amount of photos for these species so that the artificial intelligence system of iNaturalist can automatically identify them. There are some species that cannot be identified with photos, but for most of these 288 species, this can be achieved. And now we are at a very good phase of being able to identify most of these species. So any user, no matter if this is at a border control or a single citizen that have just identified an unknown species, can use actually this application for identifying and reporting invasive species. Also, we are developing an early alert system. This is done together with OneSTOP, and this system will be very flexible. The user, any user, can define specific alerts. So the user can define a specific geographic space of interest. That could be a country, that could be a specific MPA where the user is a manager, and so on. And he can create alerts for specific species, groups of species, all non-native species that appeared in this specific region or in the neighborhood of this region. at a specific time interval or just new occurrences. And this is linked to GBIF, so it takes all the information that is available in GBIF and transform it to alerts that are user-defined. This is based on the Life Riparias project, who did something similar in Belgium, but here we are expanding this to cover the entire Europe, all environments, all non-native species. In terms of prioritization, we are working on prioritizing the invasive species threats. We have developed a database of interactions between invasive species and threatened species, and this has been enriched through systematic review of impacts to native species. For these species, we have developed species distribution models based on various scenarios of invasions, and the idea is to use these distributions of invasive species, of the threatened native species they impact, and of the magnitude of such impacts, and assess the cumulative impact to all threatened species through the symbol index. And the product here will be actually maps of cumulative impacts that can be used to prioritize sites, species for management. In terms of control, we have 11 case studies, and you can see here the species of these case studies. And the idea is to assess the management feasibility for non-native species and to create collaborative networks through communities of practice in order to test management approaches and disseminate proper management approaches to relevant stakeholder authorities, also citizens. And we are involving actually citizens, we are engaging citizens in such activities. For example, we're having lionfish removal activities in 2 Greek islands, in Crete and Santorini. And here people participate and we provide all the material they need, these tubes and Hawaiian slings to take and safely remove lionfish. We help organize social events and promote the consumption of lionfish, and in this way the creation of a demand and the targeted fisheries of lionfish, and several other activities aiming to reduce the population of lionfish and thus reduce the impacts of the specific species. And similar work is being done in other case studies. For example, for the red swamp crayfish, we have open labs. We train citizens to, first of all, identify, to use traps to remove the species and contribute in this way to the control of its populations. There are several other citizen science initiatives, for example, in marinas, where citizens, essentially boat owners, participate in assessment surveys. We collect non-native species in the marinas. Then there are open labs to identify the collected species. And they also participate in the deployment of collectors or of settlement plates. And they provide every month photos of these plates so that we can identify the settlement of non-native species. And in this way, the boat owners participate and have a very good knowledge and overview of what is happening in their marinas and what are the impacts of specific non-native species. We're also developing serious games for the 4 species that you can see in the slide. And the idea here is to target both stakeholders, and through the participation in these serious games, we can co-design specific management strategies by understanding the implications, the conflicts, the trade-offs, the social and economic implications of management of these species. But we're also developing such games aiming for the public, and this is mainly to raise awareness about the impacts and the management options, the necessity of such management actions, but also potential implications and side effects of management of non-native species. In terms of building capacity, we also aim to create networks of researchers working on biodiversity and on non-native species. And one such effort is the invitation to large groups of scientists in order to share data they have, data that remain scattered in personal repositories and institutions, so that they become openly available through publications, through collective publications, and ultimately through open sourced databases like Aegean and GDIF. And for example, in our first effort with invasive species of union concern, we managed to collect about 100,000 occurrence records provided by more than 300 contributors from 34 countries, so creating quite a large data set. And we have made a similar effort for marine species in the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, and similar efforts are planned in the course of the project. A lot of information is in the website, so you can retrieve information about all activities and the results of the project there. We are active also in the social networks. You can see the accounts we have in Blue Sky and LinkedIn, and all information about events, activities, the conferences and webinars we organize, citizen science activities and opportunities to join these activities, the summer schools, the massive online open courses, everything is there in the website. And I will focus just on the MOOCs, these massive open online courses. We have 5 courses planned. These are designed by our colleagues from the University of Pavia. The first one is online, the second one is ready to be online, the third one is ongoing. And there is a wealth of information there, and anyone from students to scientists to the wider public can learn about invasive species through these MOOCs. And actually there is a test after each MOOC, and even a certificate can be issued. So this is appropriate also for university courses, for example. Actually, I use it as complementary to my university course. So anyone interested, you can contact us for more information. I will finish by mentioning that our next conference is in November, 19-20 November. This will be about cost-efficient detection and monitoring, and about novel tools and citizen science. So if you are interested, again, more information will be available in the website and the social media. And by that, I would like to mention that these are the 20 partners of GuardIAS. We are more than 100 colleagues that participate in this effort. And I thank all of them and thank you all for attending.
Thank you very much, Professor, for that excellent overview. I think one particularly important thing emerging from your presentation is the idea that effective biosecurity increasingly depends on integration, and that is across data sets, technologies, and monitoring systems, institutions, and even across national boundaries. So we're now going to transition from aquatic to terrestrial systems while continuing many of those same themes of coordination, early detection, stakeholder engagement, and decision support frameworks. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Laurie Lawson Handley. Dr. Handley is a molecular ecologist at the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology and leads the air DNA component within the Horizon Europe OneSTOP project. Her work focuses on innovative approaches for species detection and monitoring, particularly environmental DNA and airborne DNA applications for biodiversity and invasive species surveillance. Dr. Handley, thank you for being here today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. So it's a real pleasure to be here today to represent the OneSTOP project. So OneSTOP is focusing on pioneering a joined-up approach to minimize the introduction, establishment, spread, and impact of terrestrial invasive species. So in that sense, it's complementary to the work of GuardIAS. And sorry, can't see my next slide button. There we go. And we are 20 partners from universities and research institutes and small enterprises from across Europe, with the addition of New Zealand and South Africa. And our project's led by Quentin Groom from Mice Botanic Garden in Belgium. And so Sebastian gave a really great introduction to invasive alien species earlier. So just to very briefly recap, I think many of you or all of you that are on the call will already know that by invasive alien species, we mean those that are intentionally or unintentionally introduced by human activities into ecosystems where they don't naturally occur, causing harm to biodiversity, the economy, or human health. And they're one of the five main drivers of biodiversity loss and cost the European Union over 12 billion euros annually. And I think, as Sebastian mentioned earlier as well, the increase in trade and transport and climate change that we're seeing is accelerating the pace of invasions, meaning that effective control measures are more urgent than ever. But despite a lot of efforts that are ongoing in terms of research and policy, there are still major gaps in the early detection, dissemination, and approach to prioritization for effective invasive species management. And certainly greater join up is needed in terms of both science and policy. So OneStop is seeking to address these gaps across four main pillars. Firstly, by harnessing current technologies and citizen science to deliver methods for identification, early detection, and surveillance. Secondly, by improving data dissemination by automating workflows and adhering to FAIR principles. Thirdly, by integrating detection with robust ecological tools to aid prioritization. And finally, by fostering socio-political action through continuous stakeholder engagement to inform both policy and management. And our approach is bringing together scientists, managers, and policymakers, as well as members of the public, within 5 living labs to co-develop methods for invasive species detection and improve data publication. So alongside, we're using ecological modeling, tools such as culturomics and horizon scanning to prioritize species and regions that are likely to be impacted by invasive species, while improving awareness and aiding decision-making by managers and policymakers. So at the core of OneStop, we have 5 living labs across Belgium, the UK, Finland, Portugal, and Romania. And they're engaging a range of local stakeholders to identify key species and sites for testing of detection methods and to improve tools and address the needs of managers and policymakers, as well as raising public awareness at both local, regional, and also national levels. So I'm just going to go over our 4 main pillars in a bit more detail. So our first pillar is detection, and the aim here is to harness current technologies and citizen science to deliver integrated methods for identification, early detection and surveillance. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of our main detection approaches. So firstly, as Stelios mentioned, in recent years, there's been huge advances in the analysis of environmental DNA, and it now means that we can sample and sequence DNA from air. So within OneStop, we're deploying these large volume cyclone samplers, such as the one shown here, that have been developed by a small enterprise called Platform Kinetics. And these are being deployed in all of our 5 living labs later this month. And they'll be sampling until September this year. So those samples will then be sequenced for plants, fungi, invertebrates, and vertebrates. And then OneStop is employing 2 computer vision technologies, Chameleon and Amy traps, which involve the automated identification and monitoring of invasive species through image analysis. So Chameleon shown here. So these are car-mounted cameras like those used for Google Street View, and they were developed and first applied to biodiversity monitoring in 2023 as part of a Biodiversity Plus project. So this technology has been tested so far in 11 countries, and efforts in image processing, model training, and evaluation are ongoing. So if you want to find out more about computer vision, then you can just click on these QR codes. So Amy traps are our second computer vision technology. So these are automated monitoring of insect traps that have camera systems integrated with UV and LED lights, as well as motion detection software to capture images of nocturnal insects that are attracted to the trap. And there's an autonomous imaging system on board that enables real-time processing of images. In OneStop, private gardens are recognised as sentinels for the detection of invasive plants and some invertebrate groups, as they're recognised as a really important entry point for invasive species. And the majority of invasive plants have been introduced as ornamental plants and spread from gardens. So within OneStop, we're engaging with gardeners through to do citizen science activities for the detection of invasive plants and invertebrates. And we're currently developing an Our Shiny app for our citizen scientists to record invasive species in gardens, and that integrates with iNaturalist. And our final technology that I'll talk about today is iEcology. So this is the use of secondary data from online sources such as social media to answer ecological questions. And in OneStop, we're using this technology to investigate whether such data can help in the early detection and tracking of invasive species. So far we've developed a software package called iEcology IAS Miner, and the QR code for that is here if you want to take a look at it. And this is enabling repeatable mining of data from online platforms. So our second pillar is prioritization. And here we're using a combination of tools such as species distribution models, risk mapping, and horizon scanning to rank invasive species based on their likelihood of arrival, establishment, spread, and impact. And we're developing an invaders toolbox to equip stakeholders to guide the allocation of resources. I'll just give an example of some recent work within this pillar, and this is the publication of the IAS distribution map gallery. So this gallery includes current and future projections of species distributions across Europe for invasive species that are either on the European list or additionally selected by our living labs. So if you want to know more about this, we've just launched a YouTube video explainer, which can be accessed by this QR code. And the distribution map gallery is also currently available to look at as well. Our third pillar is dissemination. And here the aim is to automate and improve data flow so that information gets to managers and policymakers as quickly as possible. So FAIR principles are at the absolute core of OneStop. All our data and metadata and software is standardized, open and reproducible. And a key goal is to automate the flow of data to GBIF and to national GRIS checklists. And as Stelios said as well, so in collaboration with GuardIAS, we're creating this alert system to inform stakeholders of potential new invasive species using that data from GBIF and GRIS checklists. So our final pillar is socio-political action. And the aim here is to understand the societal influences, to co-create methodologies within our living labs and use techniques such as culturomics for providing socioeconomic insights. And through our living labs, we're providing opportunities for citizen science participation. And the living labs are really key to this pillar as they offer those real-world settings for testing the methodologies and ensuring that local stakeholder engagement. So that's a very whistle-stop tour through the whole of the OneStop project. And if you'd like to know more, you can either follow us on LinkedIn or Blue Sky and have a look at our grant proposal, which was published in the Rio Journal. And our website is you can access through this QR code. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Handley, and thank you again to both of our speakers for really insightful presentations. One thing I find exciting is that although GuardIAS and OneStop focus on different systems such as aquatic and terrestrial, many of the broader challenges are remarkably similar. You know, how to move from reactive to proactive management, or how to integrate growing data streams and coordinate across institutions and countries, and how to connect science with real-world implementations. So for the next part of the webinar, I'd like to open a broader discussion around some of these shared themes and future directions for invasion science and biosecurity. So I'm going to start with the questions. This question is for both of you. Both GuardIAS and OneStop involve extremely complex coordinations across institutions, countries, disciplines, and stakeholders. So from your experience so far, what do you think are the biggest barriers to building truly integrated continental scale biosecurity systems, and where do you think Europe is making the most progress?
Would you like to start, Stelios, or?
You can start, yes.
So if I'm going to start, can I switch that question round and maybe mention first where I think Europe is making the most progress? So I think, the fact that we are here today is a really good example of something that, a really positive thing that's happening in Europe. We have continental scale opportunities for funding through the Horizon project and also through actions such as the European Cooperation in Science and Technology. So that provides networks of researchers and policymakers, end users across the whole spectrum of invasive species to really join together and make sure that we do have this joined up approach. I think that Europe is probably leading the world in that sense, and so that's a really positive start. Yeah, I think, and the fact that we have these European regulations as well really requires that joined up effort. But I think probably one of the biggest barriers that we have is data latency. So we're producing a huge amount of data. And, as Stelios mentioned that, in his talk as well, that, there's a lot of data that is just sitting on separate databases, and there isn't that join up and general publication. So we need to make sure that we mobilize that data as quickly as we can so that managers can really access it and use it most effectively. And the other thing I would say is that I think we need to be really thinking across ecosystems. So, and take a more of a One Health approach in terms of the join up. So the join up is good, but of course it could always be better.
Okay, I fully agree with what Laurie said. Just to add a bit, so in terms of where Europe is making important progress, I think the invasive species regulation by itself is a very good progress in Europe in terms that it provides a common policy framework, common policy architecture for all member states. And all member states have specific restrictions, management obligations for the Union species list. So there is an effort of governance integration. At the same time, this is also a barrier, governance integration, because we need a system, a governance system that connects, pre-border, border, post-border actions. But currently we have different jurisdictions, different mandates, different surveillance protocols, different approaches in terms of responsible authorities in the member states. So there is these differences across member states, and as invasions, especially for the aquatic environment, easily cross borders much faster than different member states can communicate to each other. I think integrating this governance across the European continent is very important. Europe is doing well in the sense that there is a data infrastructure through Aegean, which is a product of the European Commission for supporting the implementation of the invasive species regulation. But on the other hand, more has to be done in terms of data interoperability. We have different databases and assets such as Aquanis, RIMS, GBIF, EMODNet. Some of them are global, some of them are European. We also have citizen science efforts and streams of information there. So I think the challenge is to harmonize all this information so that we can build pan-European alert systems and create operational workflows. And actually GuardIAS and OneSTOP work on this. So this effort to create this the system alert benefiting from GBIF datasets and workflows. And GBIF is actually an aggregator aiming to collect data from many different sources. So I think this is on the right direction. And I think another barrier, an important barrier, is that there is a gap between detection and response in Europe. So we are improving in detection capacity, and both OneSTOP and GuardIAS work a lot on that, utilizing eDNA, utilizing artificial intelligence, robotics, remote sensing, hydroacoustics. So we are becoming stronger and stronger in terms of monitoring capacity and detection capacity. But then what? I mean, early warning matters only if authorities then can quickly act and have the resources to act. And this is what we miss. This pilot project funded by Europe and managed by IUCN, this Rapid Response Fund, I think this is on the right direction, but this has to be upscaled, and a constant funding mechanism is needed so that from detection we go seamlessly to action and effective management.
Yeah, I think you just answered my second question a little bit. So one recurring theme across both projects is the rapid expansion of detection technologies, such as eDNA, AI-assisted monitoring, computer vision, acoustic monitoring, as you mentioned in your presentation, citizen science, and automated workflows. But detecting invasive species is only one part of the challenge. So how do you make sure these technologies actually translate into faster management responses and policy actions rather than simply generate more data?
Yeah, if I may continue from
Yeah.
what I just mentioned, so these systems and these technologies should not remain just observation systems, but should be incorporated into decision systems. So they should trigger specific actions. I mean, when we get an eDNA detection, then this should trigger a validation pathway, an assessment of the risk of this specific species, then notification to the competent authorities, and when relevant, a response, a rapid response to address this new introduction. So yeah, this is what I believe this is what is needed, incorporating these technologies into decision systems.
I do completely agree with Stelios's point there as well. And I mean, I have some first-hand experience of this this issue as well, given that, produced a lot of eDNA data in my time, and it isn't always that data isn't always acted upon due to limited resources, but also partly because of skepticism in the data. So I think that managers are becoming more aware of eDNA as a tool and what the data means, but I think there's still a gap in understanding and how to interpret it. So I think as researchers, it's really important that we make sure that managers have the tools at their disposal to be able to confidently interpret that data and to know when to act on it. And that's probably true of other novel technologies as well. But I think eDNA has its own peculiarities and challenges. And the global eDNA community is working really hard to address this. So there are initiatives towards global standards and also to provide like traffic light systems for quality assurance so that data can be interpreted correctly. And I think it's really important that the second point that was made there about prioritization there as well, because there's only limited resources to go around. So managers are faced with an overwhelming amount of data. They need to know where to be able to direct those resources.
Yeah. Following that idea, both projects place this strong emphasis on open and fair data systems. the interoperability and the integration with other platforms such as ESIN and GBIF. How important do you think open data infrastructures will be for the future of global invasion science, particularly as invasions become increasingly transboundary under climate and trade changes?
Can I go? I think that one's quite an easy question to answer in the sense that it's got to be absolutely essential. I mean, I think that, the fact that both Stelios and I are here representing projects that have that, core philosophy, hopefully speaking on both our behalves. And through experience of working on horizon scanning projects in various countries as well, you're never thinking about a particular country in isolation. You're thinking about, you could be looking at an island in the Caribbean, but needing to consider trade routes between there and the Mediterranean, as Stelios highlighted in his slides as well. So having those global data sets open so that you can, really forget about the national boundaries and think about the trade routes and things more holistically is absolutely essential. And we need to be able to give those tools and data and opportunities to everybody around the world who is tackling this issue. It's not something that is just handled at a local or a national level.
Yes, I fully agree with Loris. The invasion, the biological invasions problem is transnational and cross-border. So having data hidden in national or institutional repositories does not facilitate collaboration to address the issue of biological invasions. And also it is a matter of, the best use of taxpayers' money. So all these projects and the data collection are paid by citizens, and using them just once for one project, one activity, one paper, one output is not a good use of the taxpayers' money. These should be used multiple times, again and again, and the only way to do that is to make them available to anyone through open data infrastructures. But I would add here that open is not enough, it is essential, but these infrastructures should also be curated, maintained, be fair, connected also, as mentioned before, to these governance triggers, converting these observations into alerts and action whenever needed.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think the job of scientists is to make the data not just available, but interpretable for the rest of the people. So OneStop places this strong emphasis on socio-political dimensions, the public perception, the living labs, and culturomics, while GuardIAS also emphasizes stakeholder engagement and citizen science. In your view, how much of the invasive species challenge is ultimately technological, and how much is fundamentally social or political, considering that we need to pass the boundaries of nations?
Shall I go? It's difficult to know who wants to go first. For me, it's definitely both. I don't think you can say one or the other, or 50% one or 50% the other. I think that both of us have demonstrated that with these projects we're really pushing the boundaries of technology, and I don't think we're going to have a shortage of data. The thing that concerns me from the technology point of view is how that data is collected. So a lot of the data that we have so far for invasive species is very patchy. It's collected in a very heterogeneous way by different organizations, different temporal scales, different geographic scales. It could be very intense for one country and not very intense for others. So I think, focusing on how we actually collect the data from a survey point of view is really important, not just from, what tools we're actually using to collect that. Yeah, and I think that there's obviously that really, really important socio-political element as well, because I think everybody has a responsibility to help prevent the spread of invasive species. And it's quite frustrating really that there are quite simple measures that can be taken to reduce the spread of invasive species. There are campaigns like Check Clean Dry in the UK, which is very, very effective, but not universally rolled out. And there are, simple biosecurity procedures that can be carried out, but whether people are implementing those measures is really, really very patchy. So yeah, I think inevitably it's an important combination of those two things.
Yes, I also fully agree. Both dimensions are absolutely relevant. Maybe I would put a bit more weight to the social political dimension, in the sense that for successful management, usually the enforcement, the mandates of institutions, sustained funding, acceptance by the stakeholders and the society of the management measures, also willingness to act before the impacts are fully visible. All these are essential for a successful management.
And considering these equivalence between both of them, where do you think we're lacking and are strengthening our efforts nowadays between the social, political, and the technological aspects of this?
I think we are doing very well on the technological part, and from the presentations from OneSTOP and GuardIAS, we could see many novel tools and innovation, not yet widely used, but the technology is there and it can be used. On the other hand, we are behind in terms of management actions, and yeah. So I would say that the socio-political part is a bit lacking behind technological innovation.
Dr. Do you have any opinions about that?
Just to think really that yeah, I mean I completely agree with what Stelios was saying, but just I think maybe we need to be thinking a bit more holistically than just invasive species, and that will give us the opportunity to build in better biosecurity. If we think about a one health perspective. So just going back to what I was saying earlier about the patchiness of survey design, if we can piggyback on routine monitoring for things like soil and water quality or pathogen detection and that kind of thing, and really, really build this holistic system, then I think we'll be killing several birds with one stone, and that will provide the opportunity to join up resources across different across different stresses and different aspects as well, especially when resources are really quite limited. So it's not so much that we lack the technological capability, we just lack that integration, which isn't a trivial thing to address by any means, but I think that's probably where we should be. One of the things we should be focusing on going forward.
Great. So I have one last question to ask for both of you. So if we were to revisit this conversation in 10 years, to say something from now, what would success actually look like for both projects and for yourselves? What changes would need to happen for Europe to move toward truly proactive biosecurity rather than just a reactive invasion management?
Okay, if I can start, I would say that one important component of success would be to shift from just recording invasions after establishment to interrupting actually invasion pathways before establishment. So investing more to prevention, and also to improve the management capacity after detection. So to have action plans for problematic species, to have secured funding, trained authorities to act, specific funding lines, rapid response plans. All these are needed, and particularly in the marine environment where I mostly work, we are very, very behind in terms of the management capacity. So we observe well, we can interpret what we observe and assess mechanisms, assess impacts on native biodiversity. But in terms of management, we need quite a lot to do. So I would consider a success if in 10 years we have developed this management capacity.
And I would very much agree with that. And I think, one of the ultimate goals of these projects is to facilitate these integrated systems for data submission and management that then feed into an alert system and combined with a toolbox that help managers to aid prioritization and direct those limited resources. But yeah, I think I'd really like to see better biosecurity in place by default. As Stelios completely agree, that the prevention is absolutely key here. And although that's going to take a lot of political will to implement broader biosecurity that will help to prevent the spread of invasive species and also ultimately, hopefully, reduce the costs of their management because eradication is incredibly difficult and costly. So yeah, so better political will for that, and also more resources and public awareness. So the various stakeholders taking greater responsibility.
Yeah. Well, once again, thank you both for speakers for such insightful discussion. I think today's conversation really highlighted how invasion science is increasingly moving this integrated and collaborative approach, connecting many aspects in ways that would have been much harder to imagine even a decade ago. We've covered a wide range of topics today, from early detection and monitoring technologies to governance, public engagement, and the future of biosecurity systems across Europe and beyond. So at this point, we now like to open the floor to questions from the audience. So if you have questions for either of our speakers, please feel free to place them in the chat and I can read them for you, or you can request to speak as well, and I can give you permission to speak on that. And we also have the live stream on YouTube, so we will be checking if there's any questions over there as well. So if you have any question, please do it. And if not, I have some other questions I can still ask you.
I see a question in Q&A, not in the chat, in Q&A.
Yes, here it is. So Tamar says, how do policymakers deal with detection uncertainty? That's a really good question. Does anybody or any of you want to answer first, please?
I don't have an easy answer to that, but I certainly have had those conversations with policymakers. And I mean, it's a great question, but it's a really difficult one to answer because I think it really depends, like a lot of things, on the circumstances. So, which policymakers and what kind of data they're looking at as well. Yeah, it's tricky. I think so from a UK perspective, there's a lot of interest in having some standardized guidance on how to interpret eDNA data and deal with the uncertainty that is inherent in that type of data. And I think from a research perspective, there are lots of things that we can do in terms of providing that best practice guidance that can really aid the policymakers to make decisions. So there's been some really great initiatives producing validation scales for things like targeted qPCR assays and that kind of thing. And there are, as I mentioned earlier, there are like great initiatives for standardization of things like methods and metadata. So yeah, I think it's a very difficult one to give a simple answer to, but I think it's not just down to the policymakers to make that decision. I think we need to be providing the best practice guidance to help with that decision making.
Yes, I could add to that not only for detection, but in general, policymakers don't like uncertainty, so they want to be, especially when they invest some money, they want success. They want success stories. So the less the uncertainty, the happiest they are. And for example, in Symbol, this index of cumulative impacts that we have developed, we have incorporated an uncertainty adverse approach, meaning that when we have a documentation about the magnitude of an impact of a specific species or native biodiversity, if this is based on just expert judgment, then we downgrade it in the estimate of cumulative impacts, contrary to example for an impact that is documented experimentally, so with stronger evidence. And the idea of doing that is because we want to prioritize species or locations for action, aiming for species for which we have very good information and very good documentation on the actual impacts. So guide action to species and locations where we are more certain that indeed there are such kind of cumulative impacts, and any investment in money in management actions will have an effect.
Does anybody, I don't know, do we have any more questions, or somebody wants to raise their hand and I can allow them to talk? Or in the meantime, I do have another question that just regarding the citizen science aspect of both projects. How can we maintain this long-term engagement beyond the initial enthusiasm phase once we start, doing these projects?
That's a great question. I think that's something that any project that has a citizen science component, I wouldn't say battle with, but I think it's an important, a really, really important consideration in any citizen science project. I think one of the things is timely feedback and detailed feedback on the results. So again, I'm sorry I keep coming back to eDNA, but it's the thing I know about. And one challenge we have there is that it takes quite a long time to generate the data, and so sometimes you have people waiting for results to come through, and that can lead to drop off in enthusiasm. So yeah, overcoming data latency, but at least when you do feedback those results, make sure that they are engaging and in an interactive platform and exciting, so that increases retention. And there have been a couple of really nice studies actually that have looked at the retention of citizen scientists doing DNA-based monitoring. So I can ping a couple of those papers in the chat if anyone's interested.
Yes, I fully agree. So give something back to the participants, having a platform, for example, where the participant can locate their own observations and having some recognition of their contribution. I think this is very, very important.
We have a question in this same aspect by Anastasia. I'd like to address a question to both speakers about citizen science and the response of the public. Is there an audience? Are there any efforts in evolving the state's educational systems?
Okay, I would say that involving students, both for raising awareness, but also because the young generation is more active, more eager to participate. Usually they are quite interested about environmental issues. So I think it's important to include among the target audiences also the young generation, students, not only university students, but even students at secondary school. And we try actually to do that in GuardIAS. So we have activities, training activities, educational activities in schools, also trying to engage students in different ways. So yes, I think that's important.
Yeah, I'm racking my brains actually to come across. So there's a really great initiative by a colleague in Cyprus who's raising awareness about invasive mosquitoes. It's called the Three Musketeers. So yeah, there are some really great initiatives like that happening. To be honest, so the reason I was racking my brain a little bit was that it's not something we're having many conversations about within OneStop. So I think our stakeholder conversations have centered more around local managers and policymakers. So I might feed this back as maybe I've just missed out on that conversation. It could well be happening, and I've not noticed. But yeah, there are some really nice initiatives happening on biodiversity monitoring more generally. Lots of things happening in schools, and certainly lots of things in the eDNA space as well. But maybe not so targeted towards invasive species.
And then we have our last question. So it says by Nino, thank you very much for this very enlightening presentation, looking at future measures of early detection and notification. Do you think that focusing on an individual duty to notify could be an effective solution, as in the case in states with a stronger biosecurity, such as New Zealand, or would it be a counterproductive seeing as it would depend too much on individual citizens' capacity to identify the correct species to get rid of?
Yeah, I think that with the tools that we are developing, for example, AI tools, and iNaturalist is a very user-friendly tool for every citizen. This burden on correctly identifying the species is not on the citizen, but using these tools, they can easily manage to identify in most cases correctly the species that seems strange, they haven't seen before. And the reporting is very, I mean, if the great benefit of citizen science is that we upscale observations. So scientists cannot be often everywhere in the field, but if there are hundreds of citizens that are motivated to contribute with photos, with observations, then the amount of data that we can get can increase substantially. And yes, this is very useful for biosecurity and invasion science in general, this upscaling through citizen science. But I agree, we need to provide the right tools, and we need to figure out how to keep motivated citizens to continue to contribute. And the main way to do that is to understand the importance of these efforts and how in this way they actually contribute to biosecurity and mitigating the impacts of invasive species.
Yeah, very much. And I think, I mean, for me, the burden isn't so much on the individual citizen identifying the species per se. It's more about the next step. What do you do if, if you find that particular species? So in the UK, it's an offence to so if you find a signal crayfish or something like that, then you have to report it. I think there's a lot of confusion over what you should do with that species when you found it, whether people don't know whether they should put it back or kill it. You're not allowed to eat it, for example. So yeah, it's that burden of, okay, so I found this thing. What do I do about it? And I guess if you're a gardener and you're reporting something like Ailanthus in your garden, tree of heaven, you then you may have the burden of getting rid of it. Or so yeah, I think certainly the tools are there to aid with recognition, and that's great. It's really democratizing biodiversity recording and facilitating that data collection. But yeah, maybe we do need to have some more conversations about the burden and the responsibility to that citizen scientists over what they do about that species that they've found. Or it goes back to the biosecurity question earlier as well about having that responsibility to not transport uh, species from one place to another, taking that ownership.
Yeah. And I think there's still an ongoing battle on biological invasions management and many gaps that needs to be filled. But I mean, these two Horizon projects are the proof that we're trying to solve that and to fill those gaps in the most efficient and like thoughtful way. So before we conclude, I'd like to sincerely thank you, both of our speakers, Professor and Dr. Handley, for sharing their time, their insights, and perspectives with us today. I also want to thank everyone who joined us from different regions and time zones for being part of this conversation. Today's webinar highlights not only the scale and complexity of biological invasions, but also the incredible level of innovation and collaboration, the current coordination happening across the invasion science community. Discussions like these are exactly what international networks and collaborations are so important, because invasive species challenges do not stop at political and geographic boundaries, and neither should the exchange of knowledge and solutions. So on behalf of Invasivesnet, thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you in future webinars and activities. So have a wonderful rest of your days, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.